friends, and thank you for joining me on the Finding Elevation podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Thompson. I'm a mountaineer. I've coached hundreds of aspiring mountain athletes to reach their goals. I also am the author of the book, Finding Elevation, Fear and Courage on the World's Most Dangerous Mountain. And I am super passionate about learning and growing through adventurous pursuits. That's why this podcast is dedicated to encouraging, uplifting, inspiring, and educating people like yourself who aspire to elevate their lives through the outdoors. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Finding Elevation podcast. Today, we are talking about feelings and a lot of other really cool stuff as well. My guest is a friend of mine, Abbe Jacobson. She is a national board certified health coach and has worked with hundreds of people over the years to help them prioritize their health and improve their fitness and create healthy habits. She also currently has started working as a pediatric mental health coach for Bend Health, which is really cool. And she just got back from climbing Kilimanjaro. So we talk not just about feelings, but about all of the mental aspects of climbing, self-talk, values, how to make our goals stick. And we also focus on why this summit of Kilimanjaro, though she didn't summit, is still a win. And I think that's really an important lesson. You've probably heard me say many times that the mountains teach us so many things. I don't at all like the notion that a climb or an endeavor is a failure if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you hoped it would. And so we dig into that as well. So enjoy my conversation with Abbe. Here we go. Welcome, Abbe. I'm super excited to get to talk to you today. Welcome back from Kilimanjaro.
Thank you.
We're going to chat about your experience there, of course, but also as a coach, I'm really curious to get your perspectives on coaching and climbing and coaching and changing people's habits, because I think those tips are really important, not just for climbers, but for life. So you've worked with probably hundreds of people to improve not just their health, but also their habits. And I don't think you and I have ever talked about this. Why did you initially want to be a coach? What drew you to that?
Yeah, so I got into coaching because, as you know, you and I share the fact that we're both cancer survivors.
Yes.
So I am a 22-year cancer survivor now, which
Congrats.
is crazy.
That's amazing.
Crazy. Yes. Crazy. So my kids were little when I was diagnosed. And at the time, I had a naturopath who told me that the single most important thing I could do for myself to prevent reoccurrence was to exercise. And I was already an athlete. I was an athlete in college. I was a swimmer, played field hockey in college as well. So I was always athletic. And then I was in my early 30s and, focused on raising kids. And yes, I was exercising, but it wasn't like my number one priority at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So when that naturopath, he said it was even more important than what I ate. He said exercise is the most important thing. So I got very serious about that. And I was like, okay, I decided I'm athletic. I could build a career around that. So I became a personal trainer because that allowed me to be active. I'd have boot camps for moms at the school where my kids went to school and worked with all kinds of people, helped people train for marathons and half marathons. So I loved that aspect of coaching. But then what I realized as I worked with more and more people is that some people are able to say, okay, I'm going to train for something and they can follow through really easily. And then there's the people that decide on January 1st that they're going to commit to their health. And then like a week later, they're over it, right? So I got curious about like what is going on for people in their minds when they're trying to make big decisions for themselves or commit to big goals. And why is it so easy for one person and so hard for another? And that's what led me into coaching.
In your experience, why is it easy for some people and not for other people?
I mean, some people have the life experience of being active. As I've gotten older, had more experiences in life, I can see that there's some people that was just part of how they were raised, that they played sports when they were little, and it was a big part of their family culture. And so it was really built into how they were raised. Whereas there's other people that I've worked with where they don't think of themselves as athletes. They don't think of themselves as capable physically. And so for some people, it's a big big jump and they have to really work on their mindset around it. I've seen people do it. I've seen people go from, not being remotely a runner to saying, okay, I'm going to try to run a 5K, and they do it and then they build from there. So I think for some people it's quite easy because it's just part of who they are. It's part of their identity. But then the people who are trying to create new habits around it or make it part of their identity, it's a little bit more of a reach, but it all comes down to what you think.
Mindset.
Yes. Your thoughts.
I have sort of thoughts that I know pop up for me that are not helpful. What do you see as you've coached people? What are like most common beliefs that people have that you think are detrimental to them achieving whatever their goal is?
I mean, there's a lot of common thought roadblocks that we all have. Things like, I'm not enough. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I can't change. So anytime you are thinking a thought that's not helpful, I like to ask people, is the thought helpful, kind, and true?
I know. I love that. Helpful, kind, and true.
Right. That to me is kind of the litmus test. If somebody is dealing with thoughts that are not helpful, kind, or true, in the CBT world, they would call them a cognitive distortion, but you can think of them as thought roadblocks. Thoughts that are not helping you to reach a goal, thoughts that are getting in your way, thoughts that are preventing you from getting out of your own way. And so I just encourage all of my clients to be curious about those thoughts. I believe curiosity is a major superpower. And the more curious you can be about what's going on internally, what your self-talk is it helpful? Is it not helpful? And if it's not helpful, what's going on for you in a particular moment that is causing it to be not helpful, then you can begin to make the shift, to understand that you can actually reframe thoughts to feel better. You can take actions to feel better. So there's different ways of coming at it, but you don't have to stay stuck in your thoughts.
Which is so, I don't think I realized that until I was probably like 40. I realized that our thoughts have such an effect on our outlook.
I mean, it wasn't until I started studying all of this that I realized that it all came down to what I think. I mean, there are people in circumstances and environments where their thoughts are being very impacted by things that are out of their control. This is different when we're talking about like creating exercise habits or setting your mind to a big goal. We all have the ability to work on our thoughts. The thoughts are more helpful. And understanding how our thoughts cause us to feel a particular way is really important as well, because it's our thoughts and our feelings that drive our behavior, right? If you think of it in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy concepts, that cognitive triangle is really important. And your thoughts and your feelings are what actually drive the behavior. So if you're feeling kind of low, down, not motivated, that's your opportunity to get curious of, okay, like what am I thinking right now that's causing me to feel that way? And it's those two things combined that are preventing us from taking action that we might want to see.
I love your litmus test for that. I especially like the true part of it, because very often that I get stuck on things that aren't true. It's some big story I've just fabricated for who knows what reason, and it's entirely false. So I'm going to start using that as my personal test. What are ways? So let's say I'm thinking through this and I'm like, yeah, this is not true. This is not helpful to me. How do I start to change my thoughts? How do I actually?
Yeah, well, first being curious about them. I mean, always being curious about your thoughts. That is like the door into all of this. And then as you were talking about how you're able to fabricate a story in your mind, I think it's really important to understand that not all thoughts are true. Sometimes our thoughts are just simply attempting to protect ourselves from something.
I think we should underline that. Not all our thoughts are true.
It is very true. So like sometimes if I'm getting stuck in a story, some concepts from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a little bit different than CBT, but you can actually do things like sing your thoughts out loud. Sometimes it helps you to realize how silly your thoughts are actually being in that moment. You can sing them out loud. You can say, even talk them out loud. Sometimes helps you to realize like, what am I doing right now? This is the silliest thought ever.
I love that. It's so simple too.
Yeah, singing them out loud for me sometimes is really helpful, even though it sounds kind of goofy, but it allows me to see that I'm just being a little bit ridiculous or being a little bit hard on myself or whatever that may be. Sometimes it's really hard to go from, I'm not enough to I'm everything, right? Like changing your thoughts completely, because that thought I'm everything doesn't necessarily feel true. So we have to work on creating thoughts that are in between. So maybe I'm not where I want to be right now, but I'm working on getting there. That's the thought that you can reach for rather than trying to go from one extreme to another, because we have to remember that the thought needs to feel true. So often it lies somewhere in the middle.
What I understand is coupling the thought with a feeling is especially powerful. So thinking about how,
The thought makes you feel.
yes,
Yes, that's very important. And when you're working on reframing a thought, you want to ask yourself, well, if I think this way, how does it make my body feel? How do I feel when I think that? And feelings are not just emotions in your mind. Feelings actually impact us physically. So emotions impact us physically. You notice if you think about the emotion of happiness feels very different than the emotion of fear,
Yep.
for example. You feel differently in your body. So one way to get more skilled at this is to be checking in with your body to try to understand like what's coming up for you in your body, because sometimes that can lead you to like, okay, what thought is actually creating the way that I'm feeling right now? So if you're having a rough time and you just get curious about what's going on for me right now, it gets really helpful to be able to identify how certain sensations in your body actually translate into an emotion. That's another helpful skill. And then once you know, okay, I'm feeling sad right now. Why am I feeling sad? What is the thought that I'm having? And then try to identify, clarify the thought that might be causing the sadness. And then sometimes it's very appropriate to just, it's okay to feel sad, right?
I love that you said that, because I think that sometimes we, those emotions that we think are negative, I was taught like, don't feel them. Definitely don't express them. And I think that's a very detrimental framework, because those feelings and thoughts are there for a reason. If we can do, as you're suggesting, dig into where they're coming from, sometimes, like you said, they're very real and they need to be expressed or nurtured or whatever it is, but they shouldn't be ignored.
No. Many of our feelings, I think the more mature and wise we get, you want to honor the feelings that you have, honor the sensations that are coming up for you in your body. And it doesn't mean that we stay stuck in those feelings. By acknowledging them and processing them and not avoiding them, you're actually more likely to stay less stuck.
Yes. I was just pulling out, I have this like feelings wheel.
Yes. That is
I was like
lots
so
of people
bad
use.
at it. My therapist was like, you need a feelings wheel.
No, it's great. These are skills that we need to build for ourselves. And sometimes we just feel messy. We're like, I have no idea what I'm feeling right now. So again, just being curious about it, especially in quiet times when you are not under any pressure or stress, that's the time to practice all of this. That's the time to be curious. So maybe like you have a morning routine where you do a little bit of writing, and that would be a nice opportunity to be curious about, what was I working on yesterday? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? How do I feel in my body when I experience sadness, or how do I feel when I'm happy? And do some writing about that can be very instructive.
It's a good way. Writing and working out are good ways for me to express those emotions or those feelings.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just, when I was little, we'd say stuffing them. Like you just ignore them. You just keep them inside and you don't actually let them, like you don't get rid of them.
And my experience is that those feelings are going to keep resurfacing.
Oh, yeah.
All the feelings, all the thoughts, all the challenges, you're going to keep learning that lesson until you've learned the lesson. So it's going to continue to visit you.
And it gets more and more painful every time it shows up. I feel like it's not like
Right.
It gets less subtle every time it comes back.
Right. It's going to keep knocking very loudly until you actually deal with it. So remind yourself too that feelings are not permanent, just like thoughts are not always true. Feelings come and go. They can kind of peak like a wave and then come back down. And so like if we can learn to ride through the wave with the feelings, and that they don't have to completely, topple us or ruin things, we can learn to be with the feelings,
right,
and be okay that we have a particular feeling.
And also, I remind myself that feeling doesn't define me. Like it's temporary. This is how I'm feeling in this moment because of a situation or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that I'm always sad, or I'm a sad person, or I'm a lonely person, or whatever. That it's just where I'm at right now.
I think that's really important as well.
Which leads me to self-compassion, because that's something that I've had to really focus on and learn. How do you see that relate to, as you've worked with clients, to longer term goals, whether they're health related or fitness related?
I think that maybe self-compassion is one of the hardest things for people to do for themselves.
Really?
I personally know it was hard for me as well. I think when you've grown up in a world where everything's very hard charging and you're trying to go for it and you're trying to like be an achiever and you're hardworking. Most people focus on when they're not meeting goals or they're not getting to where they want to be, they tend to internalize it and beat themselves up. So it's really hard to be able to accept that perhaps it's more productive to be kind to yourself through the process of anything in life. I think we all believe that if we're hard on ourselves and we kind of beat ourselves up, that's going to actually help us create. Yeah, it's going to toughen us up or it's going to help us get to where we want to be. I think it's actually the opposite. If we can be our own best friend and be our own coach and kind of lay off ourselves a little bit, be a little bit understanding with ourselves. I mean, I was relentless with myself, maybe until my 40s. I'm much more forgiving now of myself and much more understanding. We're all human. We're all trying to figure it out.
So true.
And we can't hate ourselves into somebody that we want to love. In health coaching, people are often trying to lose weight and they think if they beat themselves up more, that's going to help them lose weight. But there's that saying that you can't hate yourself into a body that you will love. That just doesn't work.
Because you'll never love it. It'll never be enough.
No, or all the hating gets in your way of productive action because it actually makes you feel stuck and paralyzed. But if you can come at it, like if I asked you, if you're being really hard on yourself and I say, Lisa, how would you talk to someone you love right now who's in the same exact circumstance? What would you say to them? That can sometimes give you a little bit of space to say, oh, well, maybe I could actually speak to myself in the same way. And in the beginning, it feels awkward to be having a conversation with yourself where you're trying to be your own best friend. And it doesn't always feel natural. But I think if you, again, stay curious about that and kind of lean into it, it becomes a little bit more natural as you practice it.
I like that idea of, would you say this to someone else? Would you say this to your best friend or even to a stranger, right? You probably wouldn't walk up to someone at the grocery store and just
right?
being hard
and be like,
on
oh
them.
my God, you're such a slacker. Come on, stop being so lazy, right? We would never talk to somebody that way.
No.
So why is it okay that we talk to ourselves that way?
So true. Self-talk is so critical. Like it's
I think it's everything.
Yeah, it defines or it informs how we show up in the world, how we are in relationships, kind of goals we set for ourselves.
Absolutely. That's one thing with all of the people I've worked with all my clients, it always comes back to their self-talk and recognizing that a lot of times we can't change our circumstances. We wish we could, like when you and I got cancer, we wish we could change that circumstance, but we can't. But what we can do is figure out how we're going to respond to it.
Absolutely. And I think that has a lot to do with self-compassion and recognizing your emotions and accepting where you're at in the moment. And that doesn't mean you like let go of a goal or say you're never going to get there, but we have to honor where we are today.
Yes, absolutely. And that means sometimes making choices that other people might not make.
Yes. Speaking of making choices, so you just got back from Kilimanjaro and didn't summit. And I still will say congratulations to you because it's not all about the summit. I think you learn more things, in fact, when on a climb that doesn't go exactly the way you want it to.
Yes.
I think you learn more things in that situation than you do when everything goes the way you thought it would. Tell us just a little bit about the route you climbed.
Okay, we did the La Mosha route and it was 7 nights, 8 days. And I was with my husband. We made it to summit morning. And then that was when we decided not to actually go for the summit. And it's so interesting. We've been back now for not even a week, but I'm still processing
of course
everything that we went through and the decisions we made. And it's interesting as I set big goals for myself. I personally may be somebody who likes the process more than the actual goal.
Interesting.
Yes. So I kind of think back to when I was a college athlete. I was a swimmer. I was a great practice swimmer. I loved the practicing. I loved the process.
Interesting.
But when it came time to competing, I didn't love competing. So I'm a little bit curious about how that maybe plays out in setting such a big goal. First of all, we had never been up into altitude this extreme. So it wasn't like we had done Everest Base Camp. And maybe in hindsight, we could have done more altitude prior to trying something like this. But I love everything about training for a big goal, the whole process. And we've been out the last 4 months every single weekend in pouring rain.
Yes, you and Curtis.
My husband and I, and we love it. We love being in the mountains. We love the physical challenge. When it came time to actually doing it, it was that last day, it didn't make or break what was happening for us because everything about it till that moment was a grand adventure. And so it didn't matter. And, maybe I'm going to say a year from now, oh, I should have, pushed myself through the altitude sickness that I was having. But it also felt like it was a mature decision in the moment. And I don't have any regrets about it.
Did you and Curtis set intermediate goals for yourselves, or was your goal to summit? Or were there other things?
That's interesting. I think we kind of thought in our minds that that was the goal, the summiting. And now that I look back on the entire experience, maybe it would have been helpful to have some intermediate goals. I was really thrilled when we made it up to the lava tower. We made it up higher than Mount Rainier. And there's a picture of me where I'm like really thrilled in the photo. And I actually cried when we got up there because I've never been up that high in my life. The whole experience to me was so far out of my comfort zone. Every single thing about it. The sleeping, the cold, the foods, the fact that we were in Africa. We were just, so far out of our little comfy home with our little cats and our comfy bed and all the things that, every single thing about it was a learning experience. And so, like I said, the summit was not the ultimate thing for us. It was everything about it where we just had the opportunity to learn every single day.
I know you're still processing everything, but at this point, what do you think the biggest things that you learned personally are?
I think I learned personally that I don't love being in freezing cold. I think that maybe that is like the number one thing. It's very interesting because my son is in the Navy and has had to do some pretty extreme things. And he said to me before we left, he said, the one thing that's going to be hard for you, the hardest for you, he said, is going to be the cold.
Oh, so he knew.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, no, I'll be fine. I took it for granted. It got cold quickly.
So where did you start to feel the cold?
The second day,
right away.
Shira Plateau. Yep. The first Shira 1 camp was where we started to feel the cold. But then it just progressively got colder, obviously, colder and colder. And then you're up in a climate where, there's not much growing. You're basically like sleeping on volcanic rock. And one night I had like a big rock underneath my back and we were on these like little foam pads. And so I was like, I'm sleeping with a rock under my back and I'm going to do my best here. But there wasn't much sleep that night. So it, for me, got cold quickly. And I think when I'm stressed and I'm exerting myself physically, I struggle with, if I get cold, it's uncomfortable for me and it makes me feel more stressed. So I think that was a big learning because I would have brought like some down pants. I could have gotten some like North Face down pants that I could have worn at night when we were done. I would have been more careful to take off anything that got sweaty. So I think that like now I understand how my body responds to cold and I could be much more pragmatic and purposeful about making sure that I have the proper gear. I actually think that maybe I didn't even have all the gear I needed to actually summit. I maybe didn't.
Staying warm.
Yeah, in terms of staying warm, because it was much colder than we had anticipated.
People say that Kili was much colder than they thought it was going to be.
For me, that was a big learning. And then, it's interesting when you train for a marathon, you would never run a marathon and eat a whole bunch of new foods that you've never put in your body. So, but it's imperative in altitude that you get enough calories.
Absolutely.
And so, we had a wonderful chef and they were making amazing foods. It was amazing what they're bringing up there to cook and they work so hard. And we had tons and tons and tons of food, but my stomach just kept getting more and more sour the very first day. And some of that is like, your stomach can get sour in altitude. And then some of it's like foods that I've never eaten before. And I was drinking at least 4 liters of water a day and we were taking Diamox to help with the altitude. So we had to pee like every 90 minutes and that a prolific amount of pee. So you become, it's hard to sleep at night because you're having to pee so much. So just all these little tiny things that I couldn't have anticipated. And then let's just think about the fact that like we flew 20 hours to Africa, like take Kilimanjaro out of it. We went to an entirely new country. So there's that element too. So many little things that I kind of, you know what you're about to get into, but you don't really know. It's like childbirth.
And you also don't know how they're going to affect you, right? You don't know how
exactly
the lag or the food or all those
Right,
things are
right.
how they're going to affect you, how you're going to respond to them.
And thankfully, like, I think going there, the jet lag was not as intense as coming home because I don't even remember the first 4 days of being home. That's how jet lagged I felt. But going there, getting onto the mountain, I actually felt halfway decent. But I do know that I was obviously jet lagged because we gained a whole day. There's just a lot of factors. And
Yeah.
you just never know how it will impact you personally.
Totally true. So you were climbing with your husband, Curtis. Do you think there's things you learned about each other? You've been married forever, but curious about that
We've
dynamic.
been together 33 years. You know what? We did amazing together. We kind of always do. We are a good team. We laughed so hard in the middle of the night when we were having to pee into hospital grade pee bottles. And we were like, we are so far away from our little house on Queen Anne in Seattle. We protected each other. We took care of each other. And we had made the decision we were going to do it together. So either we were going to summit together or we weren't. At first, he was feeling so well until we hit the lava tower that I was thinking to myself, he could summit with the person in our group that actually did summit. But when he started to feel unwell, I knew that the two of us would go down together. And we did. And we're very rational about it. It wasn't highly emotional. It was like, look, there's risk in everything that we're doing right now.
Yep.
Just being on the side of this mountain in the 10-degree weather and the wind and all the things, like there was risk with what we were doing. And we just needed to make a rational decision about what was best for us in that moment. And together we made the decision and we both felt good about it.
And you still do,
So
which means
we still do.
Yeah.
There's no regrets.
Yeah.
I mean, we're planning our next adventure, but
of course.
I don't think it'll be as extreme. So
Are there things from your experience on Kili that you'll take into your coaching practice when your clients have?
yeah, that's a good
setbacks
question. I've been coaching for so long now. I've actually been coaching for 20 plus years. I started down the coaching road well before people were coaching. I started coaching, trying to get into health coaching when the very first program came out through Well Coaches. And so I've been at this for a really long time. I'm also getting my master's degree in social work right now.
Amazing.
So I have even more tools to think about this. I think I have some people that are just trying to change small habits, you know, and then I work with some people that are setting big, audacious goals, probably like you have. I think that probably people that you work with that are setting the really big goals are probably very hard on themselves if they don't reach that goal. So I think having the experience that I have, if I was working with somebody like that, would allow me to share a little bit of my own experience, have a greater understanding of how hard it must be for people to make decisions in those challenging environments where you've like put all this money and time into the training and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, what am I going to do here? But actually for me, watching things like Meru, you know, I'm sure you've watched Meru.
Of course, one of my favorite movies.
Right. Where these guys are up there and they're like, what? They were like 50 feet from the top of Meru and they made the decision to turn around. Because, okay, if you make a decision to go on and it doesn't work out, then you were the dumb one here. So
Right.
You have to stay so humble in the face of these big goals.
And I think especially in the face of Mother Nature and mountains, because there's so much that's out of our control and we're so insignificant compared to
Absolutely.
nature.
So I think, you know, it helps me to know how important these goals are to people that are setting big ones. With people who are working on changing smaller ones, I think that there's sometimes people that feel like I've worked with all kinds of people and there might be people that think me as a coach because I've done bigger things and they see that, they think that I couldn't relate to what they were going through. But I'm not a young person anymore. I've dealt with all kinds of things in life. Both my parents are gone, had cancer. I've faced all kinds of adversity at this point in my life. So I do understand how hard it is sometimes to take that first step. And after having cancer, I was a shell of myself and I know that you can relate to that. You know, you have to rebuild yourself from the inside out. And it required just sometimes taking that first step when your mind is telling you to not take the first step. So sometimes we have to take opposite transformative action in the face of mindset that's telling you, no, you're stuck. Don't do it. Right?
Absolutely. And I like the idea of taking one step. I think when I had cancer, there were times when I had to just really break it down to that micro level. I'm just going to do I'm going to wash my hair today.
Exactly.
One thing going to make me feel better or get me closer to my goal of being active again. To celebrate those steps, because when you're consistent, and I think the thing with coaching that's most important is consistency. When you consistently do that, that's when it adds up and you see big changes.
Well, and that's when you gain confidence and you feel more self-efficacy. You can't gain confidence or feel effective or, feel that self-efficacy if you're not actually taking the step. So, moving in the trajectory of where you want to be, even if it's a small amount,
It still
helps you.
counts.
Yeah, you're still moving forward. And I think with all of these big goals, I mean, you've done huge things, climbed 7 summits, and I've done a few things, Mount St. Helens 3 times, and I've done Half Dome, and now we did Kilimanjaro. I think when you're doing anything big like that, breaking it down into small goals is small, smart goals, always the way to go, so that it can feel so overwhelming. Even for somebody that's like, okay, I want to get in shape and run a 5K, it can feel overwhelming. But if you are very disciplined about bringing it back down to, okay, what am I doing this week?
Today, right.
What am I doing today? Exactly. Yeah. And following through today, it all adds up.
It does.
Like you said, to the consistency where you are then meeting the goal.
Agree. And I like to think about when I have not summited a mountain, I like to think about what did I learn anyway. And when I attempted Montesloo in 2015, I didn't summit and I didn't have any intermediate goals. I wasn't quite as adept at that point of at thinking about it differently. I was thought like, well, of course I'm going to summit. That's my goal. And we didn't because there was a high avalanche risk. And when I came home, I realized I still climbed up to 24,000 feet, which I'd not done before.
Amazing.
I still was on an expedition. I learned a lot. I had just finished cancer treatment at that point. I started to learn what my body was capable of after cancer. And so I think we get so, especially in our culture, focused on, did you summit? Yes or no? And it's so black and white. Success is so black and white. And I think it's very important to just take a step back and think about the other things that you learned along the way that help you be a better coach, a better parent, a better daughter, whatever. All
Everything.
those things add up to having a more well-rounded life experience, I think.
Absolutely. I feel like it would be so ungrateful in a way to not just celebrate every moment of the experience that we just had. We got to go to Africa. We got to go on to Kilimanjaro. We got to see the brightest stars I've ever seen in the world.
Isn't that amazing?
In the night sky.
Yes.
We got to see Kilimanjaro, when the sun was coming up. We got to witness the porters and the guides who are the hardest working people I've ever seen in my life. Like, they work so hard and they're so appreciative of the job. It's a tough Tanzania. There's not a ton of jobs, and that there's a whole industry built around this, and they are so appreciative of the job. And our guides were excellent. They were so good. And the food, like I said, the cook they had was absolutely amazing. So every single thing about it was just such a delight, and I wouldn't change any of it at all. In some ways, it's almost kind of interesting to me because I've always been so driven and goal focused. To me, it shows maturity on my part. Like, I feel good about where I landed with it.
Awesome.
I can celebrate. Maybe we didn't have like set intermediate goals, but we met every other goal that we could have met. We just did not summit. That was all. So from that point of view, everything about it was a win.
Still a win. Totally a win.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit because I know one of the other things you're passionate about in your coaching business is aligning your life with your values.
Yes.
And this is so timely because I was talking to a client about this just yesterday who's getting ready to climb Mount Everest. First of all, I guess, what does that mean when you say that? Aligning your life with your values. What does that mean to you?
To me, it means living out your life based on, what you are most passionate and purposeful about. As a coach, when you work with somebody, you can see what they value the most because you can see how you live your life every day. That's what you value. But I've done enough training and coaching to know that most of us don't spend time trying to define what we value. It's just kind of, we take it for granted or we don't think about it. But sometimes when you're trying to make big decisions in your life and you're feeling lost in making those decisions, it can be helpful to know what you value, the best decisions for yourself.
It actually simplifies it.
It does, right? Because it's kind of like a blueprint. Like, oh, well, I know that I value family and exercise and work and whatever it may be. And I'm trying to make this decision and I can see that it doesn't really align with what I care about day in and day out. So why am I spending so much time on this, for example? Or, it can help you to just be more clear about, okay, I'm going to make this decision because it totally aligns with my values. So I work with every client to work on clarifying values. And there's you can do a little search on the internet. How do I clarify my values? There's all kinds of exercises you can do to do that. You give people a list of 25 things, 25 different areas that you could value, and then you boil it all
Sure.
down to like 5 top things. I also think it's helpful to have, based on the values, to then kind of create like life vision or a purpose based on those values, like what you want to do with those 5 top values in your life, what you see for yourself, like a vision or a purpose based on those values. And that can be really helpful in making decisions. Yeah. And in kind of giving you a North Star. These are some of mine: family, hard work, health. Health is a big one. So I'm always going to make decisions based on, for me, like active vacations are very important, or just, finding ways to be active every single day. When our kids were little, we actually have it hanging on the wall. I could share that with you, is we created a set of family values, but we did it based on like Curtis was raised with these values and I was raised with these values. And of those values, which do we feel like are most important for our kids? So like kind of like a Venn diagram.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's been interesting because it's sort of played out that the values that we hoped would be important have played out in their lives too.
Must make you very proud.
We're so proud of our kids. And I'm not saying that everything was perfect by any means, but I do think it helps in terms of, if you understand what your values are, it's easier to navigate the ups and downs of life.
And do you think that played into your decision on Kilimanjaro? Do you think that you sort of had these innate values personally or as a couple, and that helped you, that was easier to make the decision not to continue?
That's a good question. I think that we've always worked hard to stay aligned, obviously, with what we value. Our relationship is a big value to us. And I think if we had made a different decision, we might have felt out of integrity with ourselves. And I think anytime you feel out of integrity, that's a sign that you are not aligning with your values. So if you do something where you're like, I feel kind of icky, or it doesn't sit right with you, that's usually a sign that you're out of alignment with what you care about. That's just important to note and be curious about. So were we thinking in that moment, like, oh, these are our values and we're going to make this decision? No. But I think overall, we went and we said that we were going to take care of each other and take care of our health and make sure that we got down that mountain in one piece, not really knowing exactly what we're getting into. I mean, you can read all the Reddit threads that you can take in, but you just really don't know till you are actually experiencing the whole thing. So the bottom line was, we had said to each other, our safety is number one. And that's what drove the decision ultimately.
And that's what makes it the right choice too. And that's why you feel at peace with it now. I would say it was absolutely aligned with your values. You didn't, even though you didn't have to get out.
Right. We weren't our values chart. No, our health has always been a major value in our lives. I mean, some people, it's not as high on their list. For us, given all of the life experiences that we've had, me surviving cancer, my mom dying of the same cancer that I had, we've been committed to taking care of ourselves.
If people want to work with you, take clients, right?
I do. Yes.
Do you focus? I guess I don't know this. Do you focus on anything specific, or what clients do you really like?
Well, I am a health coach. So people that are trying to change behaviors and habits, those are the people I tend to work with. But right now, I'm actually working for an online mental health company that provides services to kids.
Awesome.
So that's kind of my main focus at the moment, and I'm finishing up my MSW. But I take on a limited number of clients just for health coaching. If people are trying to set goals for themselves, maybe they want to just get to a place where they're going couch potato to a 5K. I work with people around that, or anybody that feels like they're not making the best choices for themselves when it comes to their health. We would work on mindset and clarifying values and trying to help them to figure out what the next steps are to follow through on taking care of themselves. And there's a lot of people out there that struggle with taking care of themselves.
Oh yeah, there really are. That's why your work is important. So we'll link your website and information in the show notes. And you've become a dear friend to me, and I know
you to me too.
You have amazing talent to help people. So I encourage people to reach out if that's useful for them.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And people can find me on Instagram. They can DM me there at Abbe Jacobson Coaching. It's ABBE. You can link that too, and then on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If nothing else, you can say that you completed one thing today. All of the resources, products, and guest information that we shared can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. You can also find out more about me and what I'm up to at lisaclimbs.com and at alpineathletics.net. And if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Cheers.